There's something about a silent woman that shifts the atmosphere. Not the kind of silence that's weak. Not the kind that accepts being overlooked. Not the silence of surrender. No, I'm talking about the silence that comes in the storm when she has cried her last tear, answered her final question, and argued her last point. Kind of silence. That's dangerous, divine. That's destiny speaking without saying a word. See, people get nervous when a loud woman screams, but they get terrified when the strong one goes still, because that's when you know. She's no longer begging. She's no longer defending. She's no longer explaining. She's done performing. She's preparing. A silent woman is not inactive. She is intentional. She is strategic. She is listening to God in the hush of her spirit. She is shedding what no longer fits, stretching for what is coming, care enough, and stepping into a realm where her silence becomes her sword. You thought she was done because she stopped calling. Care enough. You thought she was weak because she stopped talking. No. A silent woman is not breaking down. She's building something new. Silence for her is sacred enough. It's her cocoon, her war room altar, her battlefield. And when she emerges from that silence, she comes forth wiser, bolder, care enough, and more dangerous than ever before. When she stops arguing, she's already made a decision. When she stops talking, she's already seen the truth. And care enough when she goes quiet, because she's already heard from heaven and she doesn't need anyone's permission to move. So don't be afraid of the silent woman. Be afraid for anything that tried to silence her. Because once she's gone quiet, care enough, it means her spirit is getting louder, her prayers are getting sharper, her focus is getting clearer, and her enemies are about to learn. A silent woman is a dangerous one. There's a unique kind of strength that doesn't shout, a rare power that doesn't perform, a deep, unshakable authority that doesn't demand attention, but commands respect nonetheless. That kind of power is called silence. We live in a world where volume is mistaken for value, where noise is confused with significance, where constant talking is seen as a sign of control. But that is the illusion of a noisy world. And a woman who knows better has learned not to be fooled. A silent woman is not a passive woman enough. She's not sitting in silence because she doesn't have anything to say. She's sitting in silence because she knows not everything needs to be said. She's not withdrawing because she's weak. She's pulling back because she's wise. Care enough. She's not retreating because she's fearful. She's re-strategizing because she's faithful. When a woman grows beyond the need to always speak, always explain, always defend herself, she enters a space of divine restraint. And that restraint is not a limitation. It is a manifestation of strength. It is the moment when she chooses peace over petness, discernment over drama, purpose over proving herself. It is the hour when she lets the noise of the world fall away so she can hear something higher, the voice of God, the wisdom of her spirit, and care enough, the guidance of her purpose. She's aligning her thoughts with her next move. She's aligning her spirit with her next season. She's aligning her energy with what actually matters. She doesn't have time to argue anymore. She doesn't have the need to be right anymore. Care enough. She's not interested in fighting battles that don't lead to victory. Her silence is not weakness. It is strategy. She is sharpening her weapons in the stillness. She is rehearsing her resurrection in the quiet. A woman like that, she doesn't yell anymore. She doesn't chase explanations anymore. She doesn't beg for understanding. She tries to correct every lie spoken against her. Why? Because she has stepped into a realm where God defends her, purpose fuels her, and silence protects her. Care enough. She's discovered that not every battle is hers to fight. Not every invitation to conflict is worth attending. Not every opinion deserves a response. Some things are better left in God's hand, and some moments are best answered not with words, but with silence. Enough. A silence doesn't mean she's absent. It means she's present with herself, fully engaged with her inner world. She's listening, reflecting, discerning. Care enough. And what's dangerous about her silence is that it means she is growing quietly. She is making decisions that will change her life without announcing a thing. You see, power doesn't always march loudly through the streets. Sometimes moves in the shadows. Sometimes it grows behind the scenes. Sometimes it is developed in secret. And when that silent woman finally speaks, it won't be to explain. It'll be to declare, to move, to rebuild, to rise, and care enough. Too many people mistake her quiet for consent. They assume her stillness is stagnation. They think because she's not making noise, she's not making moves. But they don't realize the most significant changes don't come with a Trump blast. They come in the hush before the dawn. In her silence, she is doing more than they know. She is shedding what no longer serves her. She is detaching from toxic voices. She is healing from wounds too deep for words. She is listening for divine instruction. She is recalibrating her focus, reclaiming her strength, and recovering her vision. And when she emerges, because she will not be the same woman, she will be refined by her silence, resurrected by her solitude, and care enough, reawakened by her stillness. There is a roar behind her silence, and when it's time, it will echo through every that ever tried to mute her. Care enough, there comes a point in every wise woman's life where she stops lending her ear to the crowd. She stops absorbing every opinion, every judgment, every unsolicited piece of advice. She detaches from the pull of people's expectations and turns her attention to a frequency that is higher, pure, unshakably true, the voice of God. She no longer needs the crowd's applause to feel valid. She no longer crumbles under their criticism. The noise, care enough, the chatter, the back and forth that used to consume her time and confuse her thoughts no longer has power over her. Why? Because now she's listening to God. Enough. This transition isn't always loud. In fact, it often comes in quiet moments, in the stillness after a storm, in the heartbreak that pushes her to her knees. Care enough in the disappointment that leaves her with more questions than answers. It's in those moments that she realizes the crowd has no clarity. They have volume, yes, and enough, but not vision. They speak often, but they see shallowly. And she needs depth now. She needs divine instruction, not emotional reaction. She needs truth, not trends, not because she's bitter, but because she's becoming better. She understands that the crowd often speaks from emotion, bias, and assumption. Enough. They see fragments of her life and try to speak with authority about her whole journey. But only God sees the beginning from the end. And care enough, only God knows the why behind the what. Only God can whisper wisdom into places of her soul that human words could never reach. And care enough, listen to the crowd once left her confused. It made her doubt herself. It made her second guess her instincts. It made her delay decisions she should have made long ago. But now, she has learned that popular opinion is often the loudest enemy of purpose. The more she fed the noise, the more it robbed her of her peace. Care enough. So she made a holy decision to disconnect from the noise and reconnect with the one who knows her name, her heart, and her destiny. Instead of vent to people who only offer temporary comfort, she prays to the one who offers eternal counsel. Instead of shaping her choices around how people will perceive her, she asks God how he wants her to perceive. And in doing this, she reclaims something powerful. There's clarity that only comes from heaven, that only the Spirit of God can give. The crowd might shout, "Move now." But God whispers, "Wait." The crowd might scream, "You're not enough." But God affirms, "Yeah, you are chosen." The crowd might question her calling. Enough. But God confirms it with every open door, every divine encounter, and every quiet reassurance in the depths of her soul. There's a peace on her now that confuses people. They don't understand how she can be so calm in trials, so quiet in conflict, care enough, so confident without external validation. But it's not arrogance, it's alignment. She is aligned with her Creator. She is walking in step with divine timing. She knows that what God builds in silence is more powerful than what people celebrate in public. The woman who listens to God over the crowd has learned something most people don't teach. Crowds are fickle. One day they cheer, the next day they criticize. One moment they praise, the next they persecute. Jesus himself faced the same crowd that shouted, "Hosanna!" one day and crucify him the next. Care enough. And if the Savior wasn't swayed by the crowd's inconsistencies, why should she be? She understands now that favor with God is more important than popularity with people. Obedience is more valuable than visibility. Enough. Fulfillment doesn't come like shares or applause. It comes from intimacy with God, from walking in purpose, from knowing deep down in her bones that she's exactly where she's supposed to be, doing exactly what she was created to do. And yes, and care enough. This journey can get lonely when you stop listening to the crowd. You may lose some relationships. You distance yourself from familiar circles. You may become misunderstood, but in that sacred space of silence, you gain something the world can never offer: divine intimacy. She's not perfect, but she's positioned. She still has fears, but she's learning to walk by faith. She still feels the sting of people's opinions sometimes and care enough, but she no longer lets those opinions define her, because she knows now the voice of God is the only voice that can anchor her soul. Every time she chooses God's voice over the noise, she gets stronger, wiser, braver, more grounded. She no longer needs a room full of agreement to validate her direction. If God said it, that settles it. She listens when he tells her to walk away from what no longer aligns. She listens when he calls her into something unfamiliar and uncertain. She listens when he tells her to forgive, to release, to stretch, to rise. And even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs her, care enough, she obeys, because she knows God's plans for her are good. Not easy, but good. Not always understood by others, but always anointed. Care enough, her discernment is sharper now. Her spirit is quieter, but deeper. She has discovered that her most powerful seasons come not when she is loud and visible, but when she is still and surrendered. There is a sacred moment in a woman's journey where her silence is not a sign of weakness, but a declaration of a spiritual shift. It's not that she doesn't care anymore. It's not that she has nothing to say. It's that something inside her has changed. And this change is not loud. It's quiet, deliberate, internal. Her silence is not the absence of words. It is the presence of transformation. She no longer speaks to be heard. She pauses to hear from within. She no longer responds to every challenge. She weighs her response in wisdom. Care enough. She no longer tries to correct every wrong done to her, because she knows some things are not worth her breath anymore. Her silence is not avoidance. It's alignment. It's her soul adjusting to a new season, a new standard, a new strength. The woman who once explained herself is now embracing herself. The woman who once needed to prove her point has realized she no longer needs approval from places that don't honor her truth. Care enough. Something is happening beneath the surface. Something holy, something deep. And if you're not careful, you'll misread it. And you'll think she's retreating when she's really rising. You'll think she's withdrawing when she's actually awakening. Care enough. There was a time when her words were used to fill a room, to soften the blow, to maintain peace. She used her voice to comfort others while silencing her own pain. But now she's reclaiming her space. She's protecting her peace. She's drawing a line not with her mouth, but with her stillness. And that stillness is powerful. Silence can feel unsettling to others. And care enough. People get uncomfortable when they can't read her anymore, when they don't know what she's thinking, when she no longer reacts the way she used to. Care enough. But what they don't realize, that this shift has nothing to do with them. It's not a performance. It's not manipulation. It's not passive aggression. Care enough. It's growth. She's grown past the need to fight every battle. She's learned that maturity doesn't always show up in who can talk the longest. Care enough. Argue the hardest or cry the loudest. Sometimes maturity is the ability to say nothing, do nothing, and just be, to let God handle what she used to try to fix, to let time expose she once tried to explain, to let distance do the work of discernment. Enough. This shift has her sitting differently now, walking differently, choosing differently. And if you look closely, care enough, you'll notice the quiet authority that's beginning to rest on her. There's a confidence that no longer requires attention, peace that no longer depends on outside affirmation, a sense of direction that isn't fueled by popularity but by purpose. She's preparing for something greater than words. She's listening more than she's speaking. She's observing. She's discerning. She's detoxing from the noise that once shaped her thoughts, and now she's becoming clear. Clear about who she is, clear about what she wants, care enough, clear about what she will and will not allow. That clarity doesn't always come through conversation. It comes through stillness. There's power in the pause, and care enough. Power in reflection, power in letting go of the need to react. That's where she is now, in the space between reaction and revelation. Her silence is not a void, it's a vessel. And in it, God is pouring something new. Everything about her silence signals movement, not stagnation. It's the kind of silence speaks louder than any declaration. It's the kind of shift that can't be explained, only lived. And she's not waiting for permission to admit this shift didn't happen overnight. It came after betrayal, after disappointment, after long nights of crying out and hearing nothing, after being misunderstood, misjudged, mistreated, after realizing that no matter how much she gave, care enough, it would never be enough for the wrong people. That's when she stopped striving and started surrendering. Enough. The shift took her valley she never thought she'd walk through. It stripped her of attachments, of illusions, of false identities. Care enough, but also gave her something she never had before, herself, her true self. Not the version everyone expected her to be, not the persona she were to be accepted, but the version of her that God created whole wise and wonderfully silent in her strength. Care enough. She now understands that not every room deserves her voice. Not every person earns her story. Not every issue requires her presence. She chooses where she shows up. She guards her energy like gold, and her silence is part of that protection. Care enough, because silence is not just about what she doesn't say, it's about what she refuses to carry. She refuses to carry old narratives. She refuses to replay old trauma. She refuses to relive cycles that cost her too much. Her silence is her new language. Care enough, and it's speaking to her future more than her past ever could. This shift has changed how she prays. She no longer begs God to fix people. She asked him to fortify her spirit. She no longer prays to be understood. She prays for the wisdom to move without explanation. She no longer pleads for opportunities. She prepares for them in silence. She's not waiting to be seen. She knows heaven sees her. She's not desperate to be heard. She knows the one who matters hears every groan, every sigh, every unspoken desire. And that knowing gives her peace. Care enough, that knowing gives her power. And when she finally does speak again, it won't be to defend, to explain, or to prove. It will be to declare, to build, to bless. Her words will be few. They will be full of purpose, full of power, full of presence. Enough and care enough. There comes a point in a woman's life where she learns the difference between power and proving, between strength and struggle, between defending herself and defining herself. She learns not every battle is worth her energy, and not every attack deserves her attention. In that sacred realization, she shifts from being reactive to being refined, from choosing battles to setting boundaries. Care enough. She no longer wakes up ready to fight every false narrative spoken over her life. She no longer feels the urge to respond to every insult, correct every lie, and care enough, or defend every decision. She's discovered a deeper kind of power, the kind that doesn't chase, doesn't beg to be heard. Enough, the kind of power that simply draws a line and stands behind it. You see, boundaries are not walls built in bitterness. They are not fences of fear. Enough, boundaries are bridges of wisdom, drawn in love, but guarded with strength. A woman who knows she doesn't fight battles to prove her worth. Enough, she sets boundaries to protect her worth. She understands that her peace is too expensive to be wasted on petty wars. Care enough. There was a time she would have fought for closure, for approval. There was a time she would have exhausted herself in the name of being understood. Care enough. But now she values her peace over people pleasing. She doesn't need everyone to agree with her journey. She just needs to walk in alignment with who she's become. Fighting every battle is draining. It robs her of joy. It steals her focus. It keeps her entangled in emotional knots that delay her growth. But boundaries free her. Boundaries empower her to say, this is what I will allow. This is what I will no longer tolerate. This is where my energy ends and God's protection begins. She has learned that silence can be a stronger stance than shouting. Care enough. That leaving a room can say more than staying to argue in it. That walking away in peace is more powerful than standing to fight in chaos. She is no longer interested in winning arguments. She's interested in preserving her anointing. Some battles are simply distractions dressed as validation. They tempt her to lower her standards, to compromise her character, to operate in flesh instead of faith. But now she pauses and asks, is this worth my peace? Is this worth my joy? Care enough, is this worth my calling? And if the answer is no, she steps back, not in fear, but in wisdom. She is not afraid to disappoint people anymore. She's not afraid to say no. She's not afraid to protect her emotional, mental, and spiritual space. Why? Because she has fought enough battles in the past to know what they cost. And she's not willing to pay that price again. She's too healed to be triggered, too focused to be pulled into dysfunction, too aligned with God to let choice dictate her moves. She used to think boundaries were selfish. She was raised to think love meant sacrifice without limits, compassion without conditions, and patience without pause. But maturity taught her otherwise. Care enough. Boundaries are not unloving. They are deeply loving. They say, I love you, but I will not abandon myself to prove it. They say, care enough. I can honor your humanity without dishonoring my divinity. Boundaries are sacred because they protect the vessel carrying the vision. In her relationships, she no longer tolerates one-sidedness. She no longer pours into empty vessels, hoping they will one day pour back. She no longer dances around dysfunction to avoid confrontation. She simply communicates her standard and walks away from anything that refuses to meet it. Enough. In her work, she sets limits. She doesn't apologize for needing rest. She doesn't confuse business with fruitfulness. Care enough. She refuses to sacrifice her well-being on the altar of productivity. She does what she's called to do. Care enough, and she does it well. But she no longer believes that bernage of honor. In her family, she no longer accepts guilt as a form of love. She no longer allows old dynamics to control her. She loves deeply, but from a place of strength, not self-sacrifice. Sure enough, she's learned that healing often starts with one brave soul saying, this cycle stops with me. In her spiritual life, she guards her time with God. She carves out space to be still, to listen, to align. She doesn't let noise crowd out the sacred. She doesn't let distraction dilute her devotion. As she knows that her boundary around with God is the most important boundary of all, because everything flows from that well. People will not always like her boundaries. Some will feel offended. Others will feel rejected. Some will call her cold, distant, prideful. But she has learned not to be swayed by emotional manipulation. She doesn't let guilt dictate her direction. She doesn't let shame shape her steps. She walks in truth, even if it walks her away from familiar places. Because when a woman chooses boundaries over battles, she is choosing healing over history. She is choosing growth over guilt. She is choosing purpose over people pleasing. And that choice changes everything. She doesn't need the last word anymore. Peace is her punctuation. She doesn't need to prove her worth anymore. Presence is her proof. She doesn't need to win the argument because she's already won back her peace. When she chooses boundaries, she creates space. Space for joy, for creativity, for clarity, space to breathe, to dream, to listen to her soul, to reconnect with God. To walk in purpose without constant interruption. Care enough, her boundaries are not limitations. They are invitations to live fully, freely, and faithfully. She has fought enough. She has proven enough. She has lost enough sleep, shed enough tears, and given away too much of herself for the sake of battles she was never meant to fight. There's something profound happening in the stillness, something powerful yet unseen. Something divine yet unspoken. When a woman becomes quiet, truly quiet, it's not because she's lost her voice. It's not because she's shrinking. It's not because she's being silenced by the world. It's because she is transforming. Her quietness is not a sign of inactivity. It's not stagnation. It's not retreat. Her quietness is sacred. It's intentional. It's deeply spiritual. It is a sign that she is no longer reacting. She is rebuilding. She is not explaining. She is evolving. She's not trying to be understood. She's beginning to understand herself. And in that space of quiet, care enough, a woman doesn't fall apart. She comes together. For far too long, she thought noise meant life. Constant talk over. Constant fixing. She thought she had to always be available, always be present, always be doing. And somewhere in that noise, she lost her sense of clarity. She became exhausted by performance, derailed by people's expectations, drained by trying to carry everything and everyone. So she finally gave herself permission to do something radical. To be quiet. She realized that beneath the surface of who she had become was a version of herself that she had buried. The woman she was before she learned to please everyone, before she silenced herself to keep the peace, before she wore a smile to cover her fatigue. In her quietness, she uncovered the truth. And that truth didn't shout at her. It whispered, it didn't demand. It invited. She stopped talking to convince others, and she started listening to God. She stopped explaining herself and started exploring herself. She withdrew, not in weakness, but in reverence. She was not hiding. She was healing. She was not styling. She was seeking. She was not breaking down. She was being rebuilt. Transformation doesn't always happen in front of an audience. Sometimes it happens behind the veil, in the quiet, in the shadows, in the silence between who she was and who she is becoming. The world often overlooks that space because it's not loud. It's not dramatic, but that quiet space is where the caterpillar becomes the butterfly. It's where destiny begins to take root. She detached from the noise of public opinion. Care enough, she let go of the need to be validated. She stopped trying to explain her journey to people who hadn't walked it. And in doing so, she created room for God to do a deeper work within her, a work that couldn't be rushed, a work that required stillness, a work that demanded quiet. In that sacred space, she began to confront what had been buried, the wounds, the weariness, the fear, the dreams she abandoned, the voice she silenced. And instead of covering them, she faced them. Instead of denying them, she held them. And in the stillness, healing began. And care enough, restoration began, redemption began. You see, quietness is not absence, it's presence on another level. When she's quiet and care enough, she's not ignoring, she's inspecting, she's not running away. She's running inward. She's relearning how to sit herself without needing to perform, fix, prove, or please. That is transformation. That is the slow, sacred process of becoming whole again. She started asking different questions. Not what do they think of me, but what does God see in me? But am I enough for them? But am I true to myself? Not do I look from the outside, but how do I feel on the inside? That shift enough, birthed in silence, began to rewire everything. She no longer needs to be heard to feel worthy. She is learning to be still and know that she is already loved. Care enough, and already called, already chosen. That assurance doesn't come from applause. It comes from quiet moments with the one who made her. In her quietness, care enough, she began to pray differently, not out of panic, but out of peace. Not with desperation, but with deep trust. She stopped performing prayers and started offering her presence. She realized that intimacy with God wasn't about sounding spiritual. It was about being real, being open, being willing to sit in silence and simply say, here I am. Her desires changed. Her pace slowed down. Her ears opened. Her heart softened. And all of this happened without announcement. No stage, no spotlight, just sacred transformation taking place in the stillness. Now, when she walks into a room, there's a stillness about her, a calm, a depth, care enough, a quiet power that doesn't improve anything. It radiates from within. It speaks louder than words. That's what transformation does. It shifts your presence. People might say, she's changed. And they'd be right, but they'll never fully understand how, because the work wasn't done on display. It was done in the wilderness, in the silence, in the secret place. She no longer feels the need to announce her evolution. She doesn't need to explain why she's different. She doesn't need to justify her peace. The transformation speaks for itself. Her fruit will speak for her. Her choices will testify. Her boundaries will bear witness to the work. And care enough, quietness taught her discernment. She listens more now, not just to others, but to her own soul. She recognizes when something doesn't feel right. She honors her instincts. She protects her space. She preserves her joy. She doesn't let noise disrupt her inner sanctuary. She is no longer available for every invitation. She doesn't show up just to be seen. She no longer performs for love, acceptance, or inclusion. Her quietness has revealed something deeper. She is enough, even in stillness, even in solitude, even when unseen by the world. Care enough, it activated change that could not be triggered by noise. It opened doors that only stillness could lead her to. It reintroduced her to her true self. Now, the woman who is wise, discerning, whole, and free. So if you see her quiet, don't assume she's lost. Don't assume she's uncertain. Care enough. I know that her quietness is the soil where her next season is growing. The silence is not her end. It's her preparation. It's her rising. It's her becoming.